let me give just a quick, quick introduction. And then, by the way, I encourage all of you to come up and introduce yourselves. I see many familiar faces and some regulars. We've been hosting this for, well, this is my 21st consecutive Berkshire meeting. Probably been hosting this for 15 of those years, so I've seen many familiar faces from over the years. So just a few thoughts. 21 years ago, I developed a passion for value investing, and I remember calling up my college friend Bill Ackman and saying, I'm really interested in this. I had my first $10,000 literally of my life in my bank, my bank account, so I had to figure out, necessity being the mother of invention. Want to invest it. I called up Bill and he said, read all of Warren Buffett's annual letters, and that's all you need to study. You can stop there. It was pretty good advice. And so I read it, and it just resonated with me. I came from a coupon clipping family. My parents were both teachers, and wore all secondhand clothes and drove used cars and so forth. And so value investing, the idea of hunting around till you find a dollar bill for 50 cents, just clicked. And so I started coming out here, and that really resonated with me as well. But I do remember the first time I came out here, I didn't know anybody, and so I went to the meeting, but it seemed like everybody else was going off to all these private dinners and so forth, and I didn't know anybody, so I just went back to my hotel room, so I felt like a big loser. So I figured, I didn't want anybody else to feel that way, and that was part of the reason we just started hosting this and inviting anybody who wanted to come. So how many of you are first-timers here? Yeah, great, welcome, hope you enjoyed it. But a big part of the reason I keep coming, look, I almost, no disrespect to Warren and Charlie, but I'm sort of only listening, half listening, because after 21 years, pretty much every question's been asked and answered, and their answers don't change. They're pretty damn consistent. Go read Buffett's partnership letters, which I assembled 20 years ago as part of my obsession with Berkshire and these guys. It was like, it's hard for you guys to imagine. It was like back then there was no internet. You couldn't access anything on the internet. So, I go around, and I still remember at this meeting some like 90-year-old guy who used to be an investor in the Buffett Partnership. And I said, I'm missing the 1962 letter. Do you think you might have it? And he's like, oh, I got all the old letters in my basement. And so, the next day he came in and he gave me it was like the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, the missing letter, right? That nobody had. And so if you guys have read the electronic copy of the Buffett Partnership letters, that was me 15 years ago assembling it. So, you're welcome. When Alice Schroeder, I heard this story from Alice when she went to start doing the research for a book, The Snowball. She went and sat down with Buffett and wanted to collect the original source materials. And she said, can you give me a copy of your partnership letters? And his answer was, go call Whitney. He has a better set than I do. Now, that's sort of obsession, right? By the way, there's a good lesson here for all you young guys who are trying to get in the business and learn and maybe want to make a name for yourself, right? If you're starting up your own fund someday. That was one way, and one of a number of ways where I took sort of, doing a deep dive and learning something really deeply is sort of one important lesson. But secondly, doing something to to give back to the value investing community or whatever business you're in, and sort of that's I started with $1 million out of my bedroom on an IKEA desk and a laptop, literally for 5 years, as I tried to build my business. And so, one of the business lessons was, and it really worked. I'd show up at every Berkshire meeting, so I'd collect all the Buffett Partnership letters was one thing I did, and I disseminated it, right? And I always put my name on the front cover and started to make a name for myself. I showed up at every Berkshire meeting, and they weren't live cast, and in fact, you weren't allowed to record them. And anyone who couldn't make it out here at Omaha had to wait, the better part of a year for Outstanding Investor Digest to publish the letters. So I would sit there and obsessively take notes, and then spend all night Saturday night publishing 30 pages of notes 12 hours after the meeting ended, and I'd send it around and it'd get passed around, and again, making a name for myself, right? So sort of my story coming to these meetings is also partly the story of how I learned about investing, put up good numbers, but also helped make a name for myself in a pretty crowded space. There are 8,000 people out there running hedge funds, and there are 8,000 mutual funds just in the United States. One of the key challenges if you're trying to bootstrap your way into this business is how do you stand out from the crowd? And those are a couple ways that I tried to do it. So, by the way, I see my buddy Chris Staver down here. If you guys want to talk, you guys think, wow, 21 consecutive years, that's a lot. This is Chris's
33rd
consecutive Berkshire annual meeting. Chris is one of my oldest, closest friends. The first months I started my fund back in January of '99. I went in to visit Bill Ackman, who was at that point running Gotham Partners, and really was mentor and role model in the hedge fund business. And just completely by happenstance, they were in this little rented space in a hedge fund hotel, and Chris was in the next office. And he'd been around for a while and been mentoring Bill and his partner David. And so I met Chris, and we've been fast friends ever since. So, I encourage you to go introduce yourself to Chris and hear some war stories about, what it was like when the Berkshire meeting was, 30 people in a cafeteria. There's also a good lesson, by the way. How Buffett at the beginning of today's meeting said, if you had you put just $10,000 in 1942, you'd have $55 million if you were just never dumb enough to sell, right? You just let it ride, didn't pay much attention to it. Chris is a great example of sometimes you only have to be right once in a lifetime. Chris came out here and figured out that this was a great company and this guy Warren Buffett was real special. Bought a bunch of shares at, what was your average cost, Chris?
My average cost on the A stock is $1,878.
$1,878, so today it's $300,000. And Chris, you still own those shares. How many years later? 32 years. So not long after he started coming out to the Berkshire meeting, he just bought the stock. But the key is he never sold. He never got cute. He's never remember, back in '98 or whenever, and the stock sort of went above 2 times book, and Buffett knew it. That he used it to buy Gen Re, right? But there have been points in time where it probably would have been a good time to sell Berkshire if you're real clever, right? You try to get back in, that's what we all try and do, right? Be real smart, get the timing right. And you know what? Chris is a lot smarter than all of us. He just held the damn thing. Sometimes you only have to be right once in a lifetime. So I digress a little bit, but basically the arc of my 20 years in this business is never should have gone into this business because I had no training, no experience. All I had is hubris, and that's what they give you at Harvard Business School in spades. But I learned fast, and critically, I found the right mentors. So I started doing the right things, coming out to the Berkshire meetings, et cetera, but finding the right mentors like Chris and listening to them. And I thought I was a value investor, but I wasn't. I was just a late 90s bull market genius. But I learned fast and tripled my investors' money in the first dozen years, built my business from $1 million to $200 million. And there are I'm proud of that. There are very, very few people who bootstrap with no experience up to that level of success, and made a name for myself as well, and got in the conference business, newsletter business, et cetera, et cetera. And then the story of the last 7 years is maybe my success went to my head. The market certainly changed and became more difficult, and I failed to adapt. I failed to build a business and an infrastructure. I was still trying to bootstrap it at 200 million, the way I was doing it at 1 million. Basically trailed this long bull market. My investors got fatigued, assets trickled down to about 50 million, and I was sort of miserable, felt like I was letting them down, and pulled the plug last September and just said, 51 years old, I got another half of my life to live, and this is making me miserable. So someday I might get back into the business of managing other people's money, but it's actually been a huge weight off my shoulders, not managing anyone else's money. And over the years, I've loved to teach and mentor in the same way Chris and others taught and mentored me, the next generation of investors. So I took Case Capital, my old business, created a new business, gave it the same name, Case Learning, and Glenn and I, and we bring in guest speakers. Chris is definitely on the list, though he hasn't spoken yet, but shame on me for that. But we bring in other guest speakers, but it's mostly Glenn and me, teaching and mentoring in relatively small groups. It started with a dozen just this past week. We had 3 dozen folks from all over the world come do an intensive 4-day program with us. Basically a 3-day investing program and a 1-day how to launch and build an investment fund that says, the first 3 days are, how to put up good numbers, avoid value traps and so forth, but mostly focused on the investing side. And the fourth day is optional. Some people want to become better investors and never want to start their own fund. That's fine. Take the first 3 days. The fourth day is some people are like, I'm fine on the investing side, but I suck at raising money. I don't know how to build a business. I don't have the entrepreneurial skills, and particularly the fundraising skills. So most people take it as a 4-day program, but that's sort of the core program. We've done it 3 times in New York. We're doing it in Italy in July. We're doing it in London in the fall. And then sort of on an as-demand basis, we're probably going to take it on the road around the world, continue to do them periodically in New York, as there's interest to do it. So that's sort of where we are with case learning. And I do see one of my students, Mike Zapata, raise your hand. If people want to hear about what the program is like, you can talk to Mike. Jeff, I saw you. I'm Jeff Henderson. If Jeff Henderson is right there, he and Mike were classmates. Giuseppe and Pedro were in my class just this week. So we got 2 people from February, 2 people from this week. Anyone else that I didn't see? And if you think it might be interested and want to learn more about it, Christina's got some flyers up front. You can go to caselearning.com, or you can just give me. I've got plenty of business cards in my pocket. Just shoot me an email and say I'm interested. Here's the city I'm from. Happy to come to New York, or I'm from Singapore because we're probably going to do it in Singapore in the next year. That kind of thing. So lastly, and I'm sorry I'm going on so long. I came out to these meetings 21 years ago, because I wanted to learn about investing. And anytime someone asked a question about, how do you define success? And Buffett, I still remember his answer. 20 years ago, Buffett said, "You are successful if the people who should love you do love you." And I didn't come out for that kind of thing. But over the years, they got asked a lot of questions, and they gave a lot of wisdom about developing good habits, not going near any ethical lines, becoming a learning machine. And then to the inverse, Charlie loves talking about all the calamities that'll take you down in life, and addiction, and having a momentary burst of insanity and doing insider trading, and you end up losing your business and in jail as a risk of the money management business. To getting yourself killed doing something stupid, to getting drunk in Vegas and losing your marriage. Charlie loves talking about that stuff, right? And he sort of it all falls under the rubric of all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I never go there. And everybody sort of laughed. I still remember when he said it at the Wesco meeting, and they said, "No, I'm serious. Once you reach a certain position in life, and all, your main objective should be is not to screw it up, right?" And actually, coming all these years to the Berkshire meeting, but now I'm not managing anybody else's money anymore. I still keep coming, in part because it's over the last 20 plus years. Those old guys have made more of a difference in my life outside of investing than they have as investing, and I've learned a lot from them as investors, right? I'd encourage you, as you're learning from these guys and reading books about them and so forth, is to try and pick up that part of it as well, because that's really important. And if you have a plus 50 year but your marriage falls apart, you had a shitty year, right? So in fact, I'm writing a book about it. I was teaching my first group of students back in December, and we were planning to teach 60% investing, 40% like how to start a fund and raise money, right? That was the agenda going in based on the feedback they had given me. And we ended up doing 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And the last third, I hadn't planned to teach it all, but they were asking me questions about, all this. We started just going on these sort of riffs on life lessons and all. And so I'm writing a book about it now called Beyond Value Investing, Life Lessons from Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, parentheses, and me. And it's sort of a tribute to these guys and what they've taught me and what I want to communicate to my 3 daughters, 22, 19, and 16 years old. That's part of it. And if anyone else thinks there's something interesting in there and wants to go along for the ride, that's great too. It's not going to be a bestseller, so I hope you all. It's going to be out in August, and I'll send you. I may self-publish on Amazon or whatever, or I'll give you free copies if you come here next year. Yes,
Whitney,
Chris.
can I just say a few words about case learning?
Oh,
Whitney?
Please. This is not scripted, by the way.
The greatest.
I don't know what he's going to say. Come on up here, Chris.
The greatest teacher of investing was Benjamin Graham. He was followed by, as a teacher, Warren Buffett, and of course Charlie Munger. Believe me, the third person is Whitney Tilson. If I were younger,
Benjamin.
if I were younger than Whitney, instead of being older than Whitney, I would have gotten off to a much better start, saved myself all kinds of problems. He's a natural teacher, and Whitney.
Thank you, Chris. All right, well, I can't talk